Alright, so the next thing we got to do is tear out this twin I-beam down here because we're not going to use any of that. Pretty much everything has to come out of the front to put the Dana 60 in with the four-wheel drive setup, so we got to tear that out. So this is what we're working with under here, and it's the old Ford twin I-beam setup with radius arms and then the two beams going across, coil springs. And the steering is on the back side here, so all of this has to come out. We're going to cut the shock towers out because they're not right. We're probably going to have to cut the whole engine crossmember out because it hangs down so low to fit the Dana 60 in here. And then that crossmember might stay, but these radius arms are going to go. We'll put longer radius arms on and custom make them. We'll have to make coil buckets. The steering gear right here is going to have to come out because all the linkage is back here. You can see it running across. And that doesn't work on the Dana 60 because there's a drive shaft there. All that will get flipped to the front side and the steering gear will be mounted up here. So pretty much all of this has to come out. And all this stuff should unbolt because I've already changed this. All this steering and everything is out of a 79 to get the disc brakes. So that should all come out, but then we're back to grinding rivets to get these coil perches out. And I don't know, probably a lot of Sawzall to get that cross member out. But we'll unbolt stuff first, that'll be easy. Alright, twin I-beam is out. So no more of that. That came out pretty easy, like I thought. So now it's just time to start cutting these brackets off and make some room to fit that 60. So she's got all these brackets cut off of here. Everything, this is all gone, both sides. So I slid the 60 under here, and this cross member is definitely going to be in the way. I'm planning on building a new cross member for it anyway with the new engine, but this one is holding up this engine. So I think I'm just going to sneak in here with a Sawzall, trim out what I need, just so we can get this thing kind of up in place a little bit more where it needs to go. So I cut out this cross member to make some room, and this is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. The front of this cross member is boxed, and that is a mouse nest in the front cross member. Like, look at this. This is the most disgusting thing ever. So I got really excited here, and I shoved the Dana 60 into the front, and it looks so badass, and that was exciting. And then I realized I have a little problem because I shoved that axle under there, but I have no idea where to put my spring mounts. And what I have here is these are some eBay springs out of a regular cab Ram. So I figured it should be about the right weight. The problem is I have no idea how tall these are going to be in the truck. And there's a couple ways to figure that out. And the right way to do it is to figure out what the truck weighs and what the spring rate is and calculate it. I don't have a way to weigh this thing, and I don't have a way to measure the spring rate. So the only thing I can do is mount everything up and set the weight on it and hope it's right. But if I'm wrong, then all my brackets are wrong, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to do it the super sketchy way that I highly, highly do not recommend. And we're going to use these just to hold the frame up. We're going to pick the front end up with a cherry picker and just very carefully set it down on these springs, measure how tall they are, and then we'll know what our target is. If it works, I'm going to look like a genius. If it doesn't, the truck's just going to fall off, they're going to shoot out, and things are going to get destroyed, or I'm going to get hurt. I'm hoping it's not that last one. So, well, here's the harebrained plan. Use the cherry picker to pick the truck up off the jack stands, and then take these coils, and so they don't just pop right out of there, I put these in upside down because clearly that's a good idea. And set the frame down on it, measure both sides, jack it back up as quick as possible, and get jack stands back under it before it falls and kills me. Again, this is a terrible idea. Oh, she's starting to fall. It's a little sketchy. This is just getting dumber and dumber by the minute. Well, let's see if it'll go down anymore. Okay, that is all the weight. All the weight off there. All the weight up here on these deadly, deadly looking coil springs. We have an overall length 13 3/4. And this one is 13 1/2. Okay, that's scary. I don't like that at all. Basically 13 5/8 is our measurement. Okay, so like I said before, these trucks ran a 4-link. There's a short link that came up here, and a longer, slightly longer link that came down here. And by these trucks, I mean the 90s Dodges. So there's 4 parallel links and then a track bar. And I don't want to run that because it's just not a good setup. They're short arms, they don't articulate well, they don't ride well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these factory axle brackets, but convert it over to a radius arm setup. So I have one really long arm here, down underneath, that goes back to somewhere around the transmission, and then a short arm that comes from the top down. So it'll basically turn this into a radius arm setup. But we're going to reuse all these brackets, and we're going to do that with a kit. This is that kit, and this kit is it's a universal radius arm kit from Rough Stuff Specialties. And if you watch the video on the 51, I used all their Heim joints and everything when we built the 3-link on that. It's really good stuff, and their prices are really good. But I've actually used this exact same radius arm kit when I had a 12-valve Cummins, and I put 37s under it totally stock by going to long arms and sliding the front axle forward. But what it is it's a 2-inch quarter wall piece of DOM, 1.25 inch Heim. This will weld up somewhere probably on this truck behind the transmission, nice and long. And then there's a piece here, a nice bracket that welds right on here and goes up. There'll be a bar here for the upper part of it. So this will tie this all together and make it a radius arm. And the cool thing is they give you these Bush DOM pieces to give you some comfort and some flex. And the lower, it bolts right in. It's the exact width on the axle. So there's nothing you need to do there. On the upper, it's like 1/4 inch too wide. So you got to cut a little bit off and a little bit off the bushing. But again, that's pretty damn simple. But it takes it from a short arm to a really nice, flexible, nice riding, long arm setup. Okay, so I tacked that end together. I notched this tube and I tacked in the bushing on there. So that's bolted in. And then here, because these lower arms kind of angle naturally, they'll tuck in. So I can't run it all the way back here because I'd be inside the frame. And I don't really want to do that because I don't want to get into the transfer case. So what I'm going to do is trim it back. And I think this bracket right here is good. I can get good weld here. I can weld across the top. And then because it's an open C channel, I can put a vertical plate inside and really brace this well. It should clear everything. This is going to go. So I think this is where we're going to go. We're going to cut the tube here. We'll tack this in and then we'll swing it up and make sure everything's good. And then we can tack that in and then we can start working on the upper mount to come down to the radius arm. Well, I got the whole radius arm mocked up on this side. Ended up putting like a 5-degree bevel on that upper to kick it in. Pull it down. It should give me plenty of tire clearance. And it's pretty beefy. And I don't think I'll have any, once I take out that old radius arm mount, I won't have any clearance issues. So, gotta pull it out, weld it up, and then make one for the passenger side. So here's my finished up radius arms. And see this comes up. You can see the little angle I did to kick them in. And these bushings had to get trimmed down 1/4 inch. Wasn't a big deal. So to set caster, you can adjust it here. To set front to back, you can adjust here. And then the other thing you got to do is, these are still kind of warm, but make these little cam lockout plates, because on the axle side down low is how you adjusted caster on those Dodges. So you got to make these little plates because it's a slotted hole that'll lock it out, but I don't need it because I can adjust caster right here now. So got to get these things bolted up in, and it should look pretty sweet. I'm really happy with the way these turned out. Okay, so I got the radius arms done on both sides. They're all welded in. Everything's good. So that part is done. Now we got to make some spring mounts. And like I showed before, we had to figure out the compressed height of these with the weight on it. So these are stock Dodge springs, which will drop right in the axle here. And then I bought some new upper isolator. And then the way these were set up from the factory was the shock goes through everything. So this is the upper shock mount. So we'll build a spring perch that just bolts in here. And the reason I'm doing this is, one, because I can reuse all the axle brackets, which makes it a lot easier. But two, I want this thing to be a driver, and so a lot more factory parts, you know, usually that's kind of better off. So the other side of it too is down the road, if I don't like the ride height, I can buy a spring spacer for a Dodge, or I can buy a lift coil for a Dodge, and I can just buy shocks for a Dodge. Because pretty much the suspension, you know, we got rid of the crappy 4-link that these Dodges ran. We went to a radius arm, but other than that, the weight, the springs, everything, it's pretty much a Dodge. So it should give me a nice ride quality, and it makes it easier to buy parts. I'm not buying crazy special shocks based off length. The valving should be right. Springs are easy if I want lift springs. So it's a little cheaper to do it this way. It's a little easier, and it should give me a nice truck that I can really, you know, get parts for easy, not have anything too crazy. And you know, it's got this factory rubber style isolator, so it should be a nice setup. But now I gotta start mocking up in here where this bracket's gonna go, because we got the old one out, so we'll have to make some type of bracket up here to weld in, but we'll have to figure that out. Alright, so I got the first one all mocked up. It's pretty beefy. It's all quarter plate except for this ring. But, so this will set on the spring just like that, which should work pretty well. That ring kind of keeps it from moving. And then it'll go right in here, just like that. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out. So I'm going to weld this one up fully, and then I just got to make a matching one from the other side, and then we can hang them on here and we can put the weight down. Alright, let's put some springs in, see where this thing sits. Alright, it's sitting on the springs in the front. The ride height looks pretty damn good because I still want to take the rear up like an inch. But the front looks good. So now I got to go in and fully weld both those, but I'm really happy with the way it came out. I think those shock mounts are going to work really well. The spring perches seem solid, so I just got a lot of welding to do to burn those in down both sides on the frame across. We pull the engine, we'll weld the back side too. But this thing's sitting on its own weight again, so that's awesome. Alright, everything's welded in, it's got weight on it. I am really happy with how this came out. Obviously I still gotta get a shock in the middle. There's a few other things, like this little bracket's gotta come off. I'm probably gonna trim these down to get a little more clearance. These for the sway bar, I don't think we're gonna need a sway bar because we went to radius arms, so I'll probably end up cutting these off. But that's all gonna happen down the road. But for now, it's got weight on it, and I'm really happy with the front suspension. It's mostly just cut stuff off at this point to finish it up, but it's got weight on it. I do still need to put a track bar on it, but I can't put a track bar on it until I get the steering figured out. I think I have a plan for the steering, but I don't have it right now. So that's where we're gonna wrap this one up, and I don't know what we're gonna do in the next video. We might do the steering, or we might pull the motor, and I'll show you what motor's going in here. But that's it.